Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to episode 11 of No More Peace Soup. This show is designed to discuss issues for people that have reached that point in life where they know they can't go on, as in something's got to change. And I think we can all recognize that place at some point in our life when we've had to really dig in and go, I can't live small anymore. The whole show is based around the wonderful book, The Giants and Smalls by Nicholas Townsend Smith, a story of, it's a journey of a small who wants to become a giant, and he goes to look how to lead a giant life from his small world. And there is a point in the book where he wakes up having started to change. He's grown out of all his clothes, he's grown out of his house, and he knows he can't go back, but he doesn't know the way forward. So this show is really designed to help people see a way forward. And I talk to inspiring people about their journeys through difficult times. And today I have the absolute pleasure to be speaking to Casey Gilman. He is a wonderful human being who I've met many times online and in different circumstances, but also live in London. And he has got up at very silly o'clock in the United States, in Arizona, to be here today with us. So thank you, Casey. I know you told me it was somewhere around 4 a.m. for you.
Yeah,
and that's not sunshine on your face.
That's my wife's salt lamp.
So welcome. I asked you to be on the show today because I know your story is very powerful, and I think a lot of the audience will relate to your story. So I'm going to let you kind of jump into this. This is around staying in a relationship that you both had considered was drinking in the last chance saloon, as it were.
Yeah.
And it was on rocky ground, and there was a moment when you both decided to pull together, and now you have a great relationship, a wonderful life with your
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what was going on for you as a man. What were the questions you were asking yourself? Where were you during that period of, oh, something's got to change?
Yeah. I don't even know, honestly, if at the time that wasn't necessarily even the question that I had, or wasn't the statement I was thinking, was something has to change. This was the last time, right, that we're speaking of, was just before Christmas of last year. And we were really kind of at a low. And I think, you're at that point, you're kind of weighing, right? You're weighing, like, the way that my brain works a lot of times is very logical. And it's trying to weigh all these things out, the children, our time we spent together, like all of these things against the difficulties we're having. And you're like, what am I going to do? Right? Is it worth this? Is it worth the pain I'm feeling? Is it worth the low I'm at, and we were just in that space, and we had Lindsey, my wife, she had been invited to this group about the book, The Ultimate Coach. And so through this just luck of the draw, if you will, right? This book came into our life. And through that, the philosophy of being came into my life.
Right.
And it was a change like overnight. in myself, I was like just realizing that I didn't have to do more things to make my wife happy. I had to actually, well, and you can't make someone else happy, but um,
No.
that's a whole other story. but I didn't need to do more things to be a better husband. I had to actually stop doing the things that weren't working and intentionally just choose my being
Yeah.
to be the man that my family and my wife needed.
And that's interesting language that you choose there is this fixing. You know, I'm a guy. I need to fix things. I need to do more. You know,
Uh,
I need to find solutions and fix the problem, and this constantly searching for that one thing that's going to be the thing
yeah,
that changes everything. It seems to be a very big responsibility for a lot of men.
the it's uh, it feels like a very big responsibility, um, but it's also a very big. It can be a very big pain point, right? From your
Wait.
logical brain, when all you see, are like are nails sticking up that you got to hammer down. You
Mm.
make everything something that's got to be hammered down, and it's you're coming to everything with I need to fix this mentality and attitude, and a lot of times you don't need to fix things. You just need to be present.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, I hear this so often talking to my clients that, so this is the father archetype in the masculine archetypes that I use, the father, and the visual I have for the masculine archetype of the father is he's holding a spanner and a credit card,
Mm.
and it is that, right? Well, if I can't if I can't fix it with a tool, I'll pay my way out of it, you know, or I'll buy something. When this part of a man is over expressing, it's all this, it's looking for solutions outside of yourself, when actually,
Yeah.
when you speak about being, it's not about what you're doing, it's about who you're being.
Yeah. 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 That's it's a wonderful philosophy, um, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about it, and because it's you're being no matter what, right? So no matter what, you're creating some sort of being. um, when it becomes powerful is when you become aware of it and then you intentionally choose who you're going to be.
Mm. Yeah, and that point of you're always being something,
Yeah.
and having the realization that you can choose to be something different. You don't have to be an arse, or you don't have to be, you know, grumpy, or you don't have to be fixing, or those
Yeah.
are their states of being, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't have
And
to be disconnected.
it's also, something really important that I just want to make sure everyone gathers is you can choose to be different in the next moment, and you owe it to no one to be the same as you were even a second before, right? And to forgive yourself and love yourself for whom you showed up as, or even if you are like, oh man, I was not really that great. That's okay. You learned some lessons. Now choose to be different, right? And you can
Clean up your
change.
mess if you made a mess.
Yeah. Hey, you clean up what you did, right? But you don't beat yourself up for it. You clean it up, you learn from it, and you move forward. And you just choose to be better than you were before.
I love that. What Hugh? Hi, Hugh. Being seen so that I don't need to be heard.
Mm,
It's a powerful
I
statement.
love Hugh. I love Hugh. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Um, yeah, you have that choice, and I think everyone can think of examples in their lives. I know I certainly can when I look at my marriage that broke down when my son was small, there were times when we'd be really kind of like with each other, and somebody would come to the door, and you'd be like, "Hi, how are you? Come in," and you
Yeah.
can shift your state of being immediately. So that's proof it's possible.
Yeah, I love that. I love that distinction. That that is a great way of really kind of showing this concept, this philosophy to people who may not understand it right away. That is a perfect example. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And it's something I'm sure everyone can recognize having done, rah, rah over here and great over there.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and your whole physiology changes, your voice changes, your mood lifts, everything changes when your
Right.
state of being changes.
And the important thing to for people to realize about themselves in that is that both of those things are real, right? You're not faking to be happy with this other person. No, it's real. You can really change your being that fast, right? It's like, oh yeah, with this person, I'm being, I'm being annoyed, I'm being angry, I'm being grumpy. Like with this person, I'm being love, I'm being happy. And it's like
Yeah.
that quick. Yeah, it's crazy.
And I think the art of being is bringing that again from being influenced by externals to being able to shift that within
Yeah,
yourself
yeah,
and notice, the internal state of being
hmm,
and choose to be that person with the person you're with. Because in relationship, in my experience, no matter how flat you make a pancake, there's always two sides.
yeah.
You know?
Uh-huh.
And so, it, especially talking to my clients and I listen to their stories of this almost stalemate that can arrive where one's triggering the other into bad behavior, and it's kind of gone way past who started it, and it's now just this reactive space of tennis balls going back and forth over the net, and you
Yeah,
can't really remember what it was all about, and this creates the difficulties.
yeah, definitely,
So
definitely.
I want to come back to where you were as a man in your relationship with Lindsay when things were looking like they weren't going to pan
Yeah,
out.
I mean, and I don't want, I'm still working every day, right? I'm still working on learning myself and learning to stay constantly aware and creating myself, right? I don't have all of the answers yet. And I don't know, I don't think we ever will, right? But if you're living in the present, if you're living in the moment, the now, the all that matters, then the answer is in front of you every moment. So last January, or right before that, right, who I was being was just, I was as a husband, I was a fixer, right? So every conversation that wasn't going well, I would try to fix. And again, you can't fix some things for people. They have to do some things themselves. And when you try to fix everything, it just creates frustration sometimes. And so
Yeah.
there was a lot of that. Um, it's been a while, so I'm trying to remember exactly how things were going then, but it was not. It was what you see in a lot of relationships typically, right? A lot of tit for tat, a lot of just silly disagreements, really.
Mm.
Um, and then the philosophy of being came into my life, and we knew we wanted to be together and that wasn't a question. That was never a question. Otherwise, we wouldn't have went through everything we went through for the 6 years. Well, at that point, 5 years we were together, right?
Right.
Um, and but we were really on the last straw, and we decided we were going to do this, and it was the story is about Lindsey and I, right? Like, but it's not really. It's about me, and it's about her.
Yes.
The stories, yeah. If you want a relationship, the first place that you got to look to make it work is yourself, because you can't really be part of a cohesive team if you are bringing problems into that team and you're not even willing to look at them, right? So that's that. Oh man, whew. So what's that was a realization that I came to, that I had considered myself my whole life the good guy, right? And I tried to help people, and I tried to just be kind to everybody, and I really tried to be a good human. But I was a horrible partner. Like, really, because you have this, as a single male, right? The way I was showing up, everyone loved me,
Mm.
and no one had any problems with me. And I'm sure you could find a couple people maybe, but
Yeah, right.
but as a whole, like, I was doing pretty well. And but there's things that work as a single male that don't work when you're trying to raise a family. But a lot of men, I don't think, are willing to look at that. And I wasn't willing to look at that. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, no one else has a problem with me. It's just you. And so I was putting it out there,
Out
right?
there.
I wasn't putting it on me. And even now, um, and I've changed a lot and I've done a lot of work, but even now, there are moments when I have a setback, and it takes me a little bit to come to the awareness that I'm being the problem. Who I'm being is the one that's creating the issue. And as a team, you got to put the partnership first, and you got to look at it from that standpoint. Not, I'm not doing anything wrong, right? Because then your being is, I'm someone who's right. I'm right in this.
Yeah.
So no matter what you bring to the table, you're not right.
And the
And
more right you think you are, and the deeper you dig into that, the more disconnection.
oh yeah, 100%. And the thing is, also, sometimes it doesn't matter if you're right. Sometimes it doesn't. As an individual, you can be right, and it might not be what's right for the relationship.
Mhm.
And that's something that, so earlier in my journey, I'm going to backtrack for a second. When I first came into the philosophy of being, and I started really kind of looking into it, right? The things that really changed my life was, firstly, awareness, becoming aware of where I was being someone that was a problem, right? And knowing that it was me. The second thing was just radical self-forgiveness.
Yes.
Because when you become aware, you start beating yourself up over everything, because you start seeing it all and you can't not see it.
Yeah.
And so it's this, man, you can get really depressed, right? And then after the epiphany of awareness and of forgiveness, then it was intention, right? So now you're aware, you're aware, and you're allowing yourself to be, and then it's like, okay, who do I want to be in this moment, right? And it's really important to remember that it's moment to moment.
It absolutely is moment to moment.
Yeah.
And this lovely thing about radical self-forgiveness is that's also moment to moment.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that shifting your state of being, the over here and hi over here, that can happen in using radical self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
just in that moment of the awareness and then going straight into forgiving yourself for the judgments you have about yourself and for others in whatever
Mm-hmm.
this is. One,
Yeah.
one of the one of the illustrations I like to use when I'm describing this to in the work that I do is, do you remember when you were a kid, you could get those balls and they were weighted off center? So when you rolled them, they kind of went all over the place. They
Yeah.
would never go in a straight line. They'd always just kind of that. It's like when you're weighted off center, you're going to go everywhere. You're not going to be able to even go where you're aiming to go. You've got to
Right.
bring yourself. You've got to have something that will bring you back to center. So when you roll in the direction that your intention intending to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having this self-forgiveness, it's like that adjustment back into, oh no, this is who I really am. This is who I am
Yeah.
in relation to
Just
actions.
that self-forgiveness gives you the moment of being able to reset your intention. And that's why it's so important. And really, again, like when it comes to um, like when it comes to being and intention being, when it comes to life, really, like, and I know everyone heard it before, but all that you have is this moment, right? The like anything that happened before is gone, and anything that's gonna happen is not gonna happen until you're in the moment. So really, like, there's nothing you can do but forgive yourself and recreate yourself and be who you want to be.
So how is your relationship different now from a year ago?
Yeah, it's a lot different. Really. So one of the big takeaways I think that I would like people to have is that when you really commit to each other and commit to building, a relationship together, um, and then you practice kind of what I was just talking about individually, right? Um, you'll still have issues. You'll still have fights. It happens. Like, I don't know that you I don't think you'll ever get to a space of never having any disagreements. You're still two individual people, but you can drastically cut down so a disagreement that maybe we had a year ago that lasted days
Right?
is now like minutes, right? And it's less hostile. And it's, like when I say that, it's like we were never physical. I know some people like, maybe that's their reality and that's really tough. Um, but we were, like for myself, I would kind of get silent, right? And I'd be like, I'm not,
Silent treatment.
I'm not dealing with this. Like, and I would just kind of check out.
Yes,
Right?
withdraw. Completely
Yeah.
withdraw. Yeah.
Oh, it's horrible, right? And I was being not a great person in those moments, and I can see that now, right? And that was how I showed up a lot in those moments. And now, like I said, it's trying to really kind of stay in there. If I need space, I try to say I need space, but the important part of that we've been learning is that when I say I need space, to also say when I'm going to come back and close the conversation. So there's not
Nice.
there's not this like, I need space, I'm leaving, and my wife be sitting there like, okay, when is this gonna get better? You know, it's important to say, I'm gonna be back in like an hour and we'll finish this up, or whatever it is. We'll get complete then.
Yeah. So
That's
there's a difference. What I'm hearing is there's a distinction between detaching and going inside and withdrawing and not being able to deal with it and kind of festering, and actually removing yourself to create space, which is an expansion rather than a withdrawal, that enables you to readjust your thinking, calm down, allow the emotions to settle, and then you come back in a better state of being to complete the conversation.
Yeah, that is always the goal. There's still hiccups, and you come back to that forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and you do better the next time, right? Um, but not only does that, that space kind of like gives you some peace to come back more calmly. I had something and I totally lost it. But it's yeah. Anyways, we'll just keep going.
Let's keep going. It'll come.
It'll come at the end, and then I'll like throw out this random thing, and you'll be like, "What?
What?" So, and this is kind of a bit of a hypothetical question. Well, actually, I've got two questions. I'm going to ask you a different one first. How important is it that Lindsey also knew how to do this? And how do you think things would have been if this was just a knowledge that you had?
Man, Lindsey knew how to do this well before I did. And it was an area of contention. It was not a pro. It was, I was being someone who wasn't good enough. She would try to show me the way, to really grow as a person, to see things different. And it was like, censor myself because I don't want to be swearing on your show, but it was more of a F you, like, no one else has a problem with me. This is your problem. Like, stop trying to make me be something I'm not. You fell in love with me for who I was, for who everyone else loves me for. Why are you now trying to be like, oh, why don't you do this differently? I wasn't open to hearing any of that. Like, I didn't have the awareness, the self-awareness to see where I was being was a problem. So she was, and still, in some ways is a little bit ahead of me in some things. My journey of self-growth, self-development really started in January of this year. And I can't tell you that all of the wonderful things that have transpired in my life, meeting you in London was a huge part of that would not have been a year ago because of who I was being.
Yeah.
Who I was being when it
You
changed.
wouldn't have seen what you see now because you would have been being a different person who would have had a whole different set of filters.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Like, and so Lindsey's like amazing. She's amazing. And anyone that has had a little bit of time with her knows that. And she's definitely something special. And I am blessed. I can't remember part 2 of your question. I don't know if I answered.
But it's interesting what you're saying there, because we can't change anyone else.
Yeah.
Horse to water and making it drink and all the rest of it. You can put it all in front of somebody and say, eat from this wonderful dish of bounty. And unless they actually put it in their mouth and eat it, they're never going to understand.
Right. Right.
And
And
so any attempt to try and force a partner into behaving or being different
mhm.
is is futile. In my world, the only place you have any control is over yourself. And by
Yes.
shifting your state of being, people around you and things around you start to change and shift because of how you're relating to them in the world.
Yes. And an important distinction that I want everyone to get is that when you choose that and you're self-aware and you're choosing who you're being and you're choosing who you want to be, right? You become more confident, right? So people think that how do I want to put this? Um, like the law of attraction, right? Whatever. Like it's not like when it comes to relationships, your being will kind of dictate what you allow, right? So so in saying that, right, like you can create a partner and it seems like law of attraction brings them, but really what's happening is who you're being and what you will allow in your life is all of a sudden ruling out people that may have made the cut before, right? So now it's like people that would have come into your life before, you're like, oh, I'm not getting any of those jerks anymore. Well, it's because you're not accepting any of those jerks anymore.
Yeah, they used to be when I was in my young days, in the dating days, there used to be a phrase that lots of girls used to say was same guy, different trousers. You know,
Uh-huh.
like it's always the same problems in relationship. I always get the same kinds of guys,
Hmm.
and it's only when you look at it from this perspective of who you're being that you realize it's you that's doing that. It's
Yeah.
through your choices, it's through what you're prepared to accept and tolerate. It's about how much you respect and love yourself.
Yes. Yes. 100%. Because once you get there, and I've seen it, I don't like to put words in my wife's mouth, very often, but I've seen it in her. She was like and I think this I think is the case for a lot of women, especially, are people pleasers. They want everyone to love them. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings,
Mm.
and that's wonderful. That is a huge heart. It comes from an amazing place, but it always also allows this lower self confidence that then allows these same men in different trousers to be to be coming into their lives. So why is every guy the same? Why are they all jerks? It's not that all jerks. It's that they're choosing the same guys.
Mm,
Like
absolutely.
you see this guy that you want to. He's a handsome man. He's got problems, but I'm gonna fix him. No,
Oh,
you're not.
yes.
No, you're not gonna fix him. You're just gonna get hurt. Is all that's gonna happen. And when you decide to be somebody who no longer tolerates that, you all of a sudden you're like, oh, where did all those jerk guys go? Why am I now getting all of these guys? And it's like because you changed who you're accepting.
Yeah. So how in when you're in a relationship that you want to be in and remain committed to for all, the family, for yourself,
Yeah.
because you chose each other some years ago and it was real then.
Hmm.
How have you found creating how you see Lindsay in your head rather than, because we've talked already about how we've got these filters, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so when talk a little bit about how powerful it is to create your partner through
Yeah.
acknowledgement, through
So
your being.
yeah. So I want to talk about for a second, you used the word choose in your question. And the difference between a decision and choosing is a choosing, there's no reason. In a decision, you're kind of breaking it down like based on something, right? In choosing, it's not based on anything. It's because you're choosing to do something, because you want to, right? And that's important. If you have two people who can sit together and say, we choose this. We don't have to do it. I'm not doing it for the kids anymore. I'm doing it because I choose to be here in this with you, and I want to create with you. And when you make that decision, then you start living based on that. And so in creating my wife, it's the same as creating my being, right? So, if you ask, who is Casey? Who am I? Right? Whoa, sorry, my cats are going crazy. If you ask who am I, well, it depends on who you ask. I'm not the same person to anybody in the world, and I see myself differently than everyone else sees me, right?
Yeah.
So my wife is the same. So not only do I get to create myself, I get to create my vision of her.
Yes.
And I get to do that in each moment. I get to do that in each day. And it's been a process. And man, I had a conversation with Townsend Wardlaw. And it was a one of those moments where, like coming into the philosophy of being and trying to understand that and wrap my head around it and live it. This conversation was like up there with that, right? It was, we were talking, man, I think we weren't even like 10 minutes into the conversation. I don't even remember, but I remember he first hit me with, I think he asked for it. I think he said something like, do you mind if I share with you what I see or whatever? And I'm like, no, of course not. Let me know. And he's and the first thing he hit me with was, you're not committed to anything but looking good. And I was like,
Townsend.
oh fuck, man, oh sorry. I was like, oh man, that dude, I need a couple minutes to take that in. And then and so then I came back to him, and I came back to the conversation, and he's like, oh yeah, and you're not committed to your wife at all. And I'm just like, I was like, what is going on here, man? And very defensive. I got very defensive internally. Obviously, I wasn't putting it out. Internally, though, I was like, oh, F you. What are you talking about? I'm committed to my wife. We've been together 5 years. Like, I don't cheat. I'm committed. But no, then after I sat back and I asked him to elaborate, right? He was right, right? When you're in a relationship with someone and you are creating them as like, oh man, my wife is selfish, or she's like, man, like she's just being just like whatever, right? Fill in whatever blank you want, whatever negative thing. As soon as you say someone is, that's how you're creating them.
That's who they are for you.
Yes, in that moment, that is who they are for you. Instead of, when I really sit and think about my wife, she's the most amazing woman that I've ever met. She's absolutely wonderful. When I say I'm blessed to be with her, I'm blessed to be with her. Like, I feel that. So in these moments where I'm like, oh man, she's so selfish. Like, and I'm creating her as that. Like, sometimes it's not always easy to remember in the moment who I know she is. right?
And
And
who
so,
you're being in that moment of your, if she's
yeah.
being selfish, you are being needy or something, you know.
Oh, yeah. That's yes,
The opposite of who am I being in this moment while I'm judging that other person as being that, I'm
100%.
probably being the same. I'm being selfish because I want her attention.
Yeah, yeah. No, and that's something a lot of people don't want to take on is you are the one creating everything.
Yes.
So the last thing that kind of really got me recently, this is more recent still, right? Is this just idea of responsibility for everything.
It's
And it's like,
powerful.
how can I be responsible for Lindsay? How can I? Because I'm creating her as such, right? So if she's being and then fill in some negative word, like you said, and you're 100% right, I'm responsible for that creation. I created that. That's not who she is. That's who I'm creating her to be in that moment. And it's a powerful distinction, and it's not always easy to in that moment kind of pull yourself back and recreate the person, right? But that's where I said earlier that, well, now at least it's like not days long. It's only, a few minutes long. And then just remembering that, right? Remembering that that's what I'm creating.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're reminding me of and I can't remember the book. I would have to go back. 'Cause I read it a long time ago, but I lived in India for many years, and so in a lot of the traditions there is arranged marriage, which from our Western point of view is a bit like you let someone else decide who's going to be your wife or your husband. It's like, oh, that's crazy. So I came from a modern Western background. So when I was watching arranged marriage, I didn't understand it. Didn't
Yeah.
understand what it was about. And I read, I can't remember the title of the book, but it was there was the story was this girl, the first time she meets her husband is on the day she marries him. So she has no idea who he is at all. And she
Right.
goes through a process in her mind and she says, okay, I'm going to learn to love him
Mm.
bit by bit. And I'm going to start with his hands or his nose or his eyes, and she goes through finding all the things she can love about him until she loves him completely.
Mm. Mm.
And I think that's kind of what you're saying. It's this beautiful,
Mm.
I can choose to go, oh, his nose is a bit big, or his eyes are a bit, or he hasn't got the hair I like, or you can look for the things you don't like about a person, or you know, or you can look for all of the things you love about them.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you create them
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
image of love.
Yeah. No, it's so true. Um, the same way that you can create yourself any way you want, you can create someone else
Mm.
however you want, and you
Yeah.
can. It, it's like we talked about a second ago, right? Like you can fill in. She's being so any negative thing you want, right? And you're creating that. You can do that with anything, right? It's like, or you can choose to see all of the good things in people, right? And it creates such a better life.
Yeah, and I think there is a caveat here to, there are occasions when you're in a toxic relationship and
Yes.
it's not a great thing, or you're being abused, taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And probably if we really got down to it, we could say, well, how are you creating that?
Yeah.
Um, and what are you tolerating?
Hmm. That's a very triggering conversation for some
Very
people.
triggering conversations, but we're not really discussing that side. We're talking about the more everyday issues and problems that couples face
We
when
we can talk about that, and I will be very open about it. I was someone who believed that I was emotionally stunted from the time that I was late teens, at least. And I was very closed off. I was very, I created myself as such.
Right.
I'm being someone who's not letting anyone in because I'm not getting hurt, and you know, I hurt people's feelings because I wouldn't be open like that. I hurt Lindsay's feelings because I wouldn't be open like that. And so I've never ever been like someone who was physically abusive, right? But looking back on our relationship, there was ways that I was emotionally abusive, I would say, because I wasn't open and I wasn't open to being open, right?
Mm.
So emotionally, I was like,
Double lot.
yeah, I was shut down emotionally. And so now in this, right, and hear me, I was wrong. I was wrong. I'm not saying right. I wasn't intentionally doing anything. I was being that person, but it wasn't intentional. Now, Lindsay and
So
I've had,
Townsend would call this a legacy being.
yes, he
That
would.
you have grown with and been for such a long time. It's comfortable in some ways of who you are. That's who I am.
Yes, yes, it's your legacy being, and if you are not intentionally choosing who you're being, you are going to fall back into your legacy being very easily. I think Steve was like, called it, maintaining your garden or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You stop maintaining the garden, the weeds are coming back. You got to keep recreating yourself, right?
When we're talking about Steve, we're talking about Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach.
Yes.
Yes.
Amazing man who actually popped into a dinner this evening I was at, all dressed in a rocker outfit. So
Of course.
of course he did. Lindsay said, I saw him a couple hours ago and he was in a full suit and tie. Now he comes in a wig and sunglasses.
You gotta love the guy. You gotta love the guy.
I love him so much. But so, back to us talking about this responsibility, right? I'm responsible that I was showing up in a horribly emotionless way, and that was abusive in those ways. I wasn't aware of it, but it was. Lindsay will now take responsibility also for saying I allowed it.
Yes.
That was her creation.
That's empowering too.
And that's where I say, once you are aware and intentionally choosing your being, you will no longer accept that in your life. Like Lindsay and I have had conversations where if I was to go back to that, she would leave. She would no longer accept it. And what that does, so this conversation is very important for individuals as well, right? This is not just about relationships. This is about if you want to create a relationship. You need to be confident and aware in yourself first. And then it's going to weed out the people that are not great.
And it's interesting, this comes into, we hear a lot of conversations around boundaries. And how important it is to have boundaries. And what's shifted for me, and it was actually introduced to me by an amazing woman called Varian Brandon. She's an amazing coach. But it also comes into the being philosophy of when you put boundaries up, it's a little bit like putting a little fence, a little white picket fence around your lawn. It's quite clear that you don't walk across my lawn because there's a fence out there.
Mm-hmm.
When you bring boundaries into your state of being, now I am the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even need the picket fence.
Right.
Everyone knows you don't walk on my grass.
Right. Exactly.
Just who I'm being. So you haven't got to have this effort of having to have all this, but I said, and these are my boundaries, and it's all out. This is all still very much out there. It's not in here when you're
right.
having to have boundaries. Being the boundary bringing that into this is what I will, what is okay with me. And actually, Byron Katie says boundaries are just being clear with your yeses and your nos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
it's
that
through
simple.
what we are complicit in the creation of how people treat us
Mm-hmm.
by what we choose to accept, what behaviors we are okay with, even when we're not really okay with them. And that's actually, you mentioned earlier, people pleasing.
Yeah.
And the shadow side of people pleasing is not being centered, not being boundaried with what you will and will not accept
Mm-hmm.
as okay. And I believe that at the base of people pleasing is a lack of self-worth or self-esteem, whereby if I'm nice and I do this for you, you'll like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? It
Mm-hmm.
might not feel that way on the surface, but I think when you dig through, having been a people pleaser, when you dig through this, being okay with things you're not okay with is an effort that maybe I'll be liked more. Maybe
100%.
they'll love me.
Yeah. 100%. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah. It's yeah. And that's what's so important about, just becoming aware of your own stuff, you know, is because once you're aware of it, you can do something about it. If you're not aware of it, you're just going to keep allowing it to happen. So, or in my instance, you'll keep creating the same things, right? I kept creating the same situations because of who I was being, right? So the women were different, but the
You
results
were
were
the
the same.
same.
Yeah, exactly. I was the same man showing up, or I was the same man in the same trousers showing up in different houses.
But being the same man, and so the relationships probably all kind of ended in a similar
Yeah.
way.
So, and we didn't get to all of, like my whole like childhood and all that. That's a whole other episode. But
You do.
but but yeah. I was a man who was committed to only having long-term relationships. I never wanted like flings or whatever. I never did that. And but all of my long-term relationships that I was in prior to Lindsey, and even Lindsey up until the philosophy of being, were all I was exactly the same in all of them. So they all had the same issues, and it was very easy.
You had the same issues with them
It was very easy
as
to
a
be like,
possibility.
everyone loves me. You're the problem. Like, it's and that was the story of my life up until January of last year. Yeah.
It's kind of a blinkered way, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Point of view,
Mm-hmm.
how you
Mm-hmm.
created yourself. So we've got a few minutes left. We've got 7 minutes left. How has this impacted the trajectory of your life
Mm-hmm.
in relation to your family? Because I know you have kids.
Yeah, we have three little girls. It's awesome. Um, well, I can tell you, our oldest daughter was once asked, if she's noticed any differences. This was early on, and she said, yeah, she noticed that there was less friction between Lindsey and I, but she also said that she felt more loved.
Beautiful.
So the awareness, the awareness of who I'm being, and trying to just be present in each moment, right? That's something we didn't talk about much. That's also just one of the most important things in life is presence, right? I mean, I did mention the past and the future not mattering, right? And you hear that stuff all the time. But like when I'm with you in this moment, like I can't be anywhere else, right? So you don't want to be thinking about something else when I'm in a conversation with you. I want you to know that you have all of my attention and that's all that matters to me right now, right? And that's the energy that I want to bring to each moment with my family. I don't always succeed, and I forgive myself and I try better next time. But that's the intention. The intention is to be present with them, right? And be loving and be kind. Um, my document, my first line in it is that I am Christ-like in my love. And whether you're religious or not religious, you can understand what that means and the power behind it, right? And that's my intention in each moment, no matter who I'm with, but especially with my family. And yeah, so it's that alone creates for a powerfully drastic difference than it was a year ago.
So 3 little girls get to grow up in a happy home, and a home that it's not that you don't have problems, it's that you have a methodology, a way of turning those problems around and being different within the struggles that life inevitably will have.
Everyone's gonna have some problems. The answer is to have better solutions. And the awareness of that. If you're aware of I'm getting frustrated, right? If you have that awareness in the moment, it's easier to bring yourself down and remember I'm showing up with love. That's who I want to be, right? If you don't have that awareness, the frustration is just going to build. You're going to get frustrated. They're going to get more upset, and it just builds. Yeah. But you can stop that. You can choose to stop that.
And very quickly, you mentioned your document.
Yeah.
Just tell the audience very briefly what your document, not necessarily your whole document, but how your document serves you.
Oh man. So I mentioned Townsend earlier, Townsend Wardlaw. I actually worked with him for a few months, and through that process, I had a document prior to working with him, but I went through a process with him that was, at the time, I felt it was very difficult for me. During the creation of my document, and a document is a list of declarations for recreating yourself daily. It goes back to the tending the garden comment, where if you're not creating yourself daily, you're going to fall back into your legacy being of who you were before, right? So over this 3 months with Townsend, I actually, in creating my new document, I suffered like a pretty deep depression during it, because you're forced to look at the things that a lot of, I feel, men especially just kind of bury, and through the process you end up creating who you want to be based off things that are kind of in your subconscious that are creating the person you're being in your life, that's creating the issues for you. And so it was extremely powerful. And it's trying to live that daily. To, again, you've been, for myself, right? My legacy being is 4+ decades old. So thinking that I can
practiced at it.
thinking I can write this document, read it one time, and my life's different. Yeah, that's not how it's going to work. Like, it's a process of creating that daily. And there's a lot more to it, but
Yes.
it's
I went through the process in August this year because I, like you, had created a document previously. And as I would read that document, there were things in there that I'd be like, yeah, that's not really true, is it? You know, there was always kind of a little bit of,
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And it wasn't till I went through the process that Townsend teaches at JP Morgan also teaches it. So I had the privilege of
Both wonderful men.
yeah. And it was, I actually took 3 weeks out of my business. And I went to our house that's a little further away, and I stayed there. I stayed there on my own for 3 weeks, and I worked on that process of looking at the legacy being, doing the forgiveness piece, the self-forgiveness piece is crucial. This was the bit I hadn't grasped prior. If you don't do the self-forgiveness and look at the judgments you're making, they're just affirmations. And they have some use.
Yes.
They aren't just affirmations. I'm not
Yes.
saying they don't have use. They do. But when you do this, forgiving yourself for the way you, for the judgments you've made.
Yeah.
That for me was
Great distinction. Great distinction. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it is a daily, it's a daily be with your declaration of who you are being every day. It's the centering of that, you know, the weighted ball. It's the it's just bring it back. Let's just bring it back. Let's just bring it back. And for me personally, it enables me to do things that my previous state of being didn't allow.
Yeah, exactly. it just, and it, you know, it's like, you know, feels like the law of attraction. You can then create anything at that point, and it feels like magic, but it's you know, you're creating it.
You're creating it.
Yeah.
So give us one last line. We're just over the hour, and I'm conscious of time. What would you want the audience watching this to know?
I just want, you know, I think like the most important thing is that it's all a choice. It's all a choice. And you owe it to no one, not even yourself, not your wife, not anybody, to be the same person that you were the moment before. You can drastically change your life in one moment and never be the same. Yeah.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you to Hugh, who has been popping in with some great comments. The exams are over now. Show your answers.
I will go back and reply to any messages in there. You know, like I mentioned in this, I'm really just present with you,
Yes.
and so I was not trying to kind of look at anything else.
No, I was popping them up for the viewers. It's the same when I'm with somebody. I like to be with them. Casey, thank you so much for today. It's been an inspiring conversation. There's been some absolute gold in there, and I'm sure those that watch this video later will find some answers. So how can people reach you, Casey, if they want to reach out to you and talk with you?
I think it's well, I'm not going to give you my phone number, but there's
They message you on like Messenger? Or
yeah, you can find me on Facebook. I think it's just Casey Gilman. I don't think there's any dot or anything in there. You can find me on Instagram. I think it's Casey.Gilman. Or you can look up the Student of Being. I think I have that handle in there as well. So either of those. And I say reach out to me. I'll get on a one-on-one call with you. It'll be awesome. Let's do it.
Cool. Thank you. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for watching. I hope you found some gold for yourselves, and we will see you in the next episode.
Thank you for having me, Fiona.
You're welcome.